Tonight on Garbage Time Fantasy Football, we're actually running on time, and we have Week 13 waivers. You ready to go, Ryan?
I'm ready.
It's time for Garbage Time. Guys, welcome into Garbage Time Fantasy Football. Week 13 is upon us, and we are on the edge of playoff time. And Ryan, how you feeling about playoffs? You think you're going to make it in a few leagues?
Yeah, I'm looking pretty good. Somehow haven't clinched in our lead yet. I'm not sure how, but I've clinched in a couple others. There's a few leads that are lost causes, so I'm still setting my lineups, being a good sport, but I just know that it's over in those ones. I'm the Detroit Lions in some of my leads where, like, statistically I'm not out, but I'm out, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, it tends to be in Yahoo leagues, I think, and that seems to be a trend. Maybe you just have no interest in them because there's much better portals you can play in, like Sleeper.
Yeah, actually, so ESPN just must be bad luck for me because my two leads over there are absolutely awful. I did so bad, so I'm just gonna never go to ESPN.
Yeah, and it kind of helps that I traded Jalen Waddle to you in Sleeper, so that'll help put you in first place because he seems to be hitting the stride the last few weeks. Guys,
you
tonight
felt pretty good about that one for a little bit.
I did, and now that Robert Woods is out, I'm not feeling so good about it. Wish Jalen Waddle was on my bench so we would fill out my roster a little bit more. I'm still in the playoff hunt, but it doesn't feel so good without a rounded out bench, so I'm just going to have to rely on the starters, I guess. But guys, tonight it's just me and Ryan running the show. Ron and JJ are out. We hope to give you a good show. If you like what you hear and want to join the Heckling fandom, like and subscribe to the show below here on YouTube. You can find us on Spotify, Apple, Google, Iheartradio, Tunein, anywhere you literally can listen to podcasts. Also at www.garbagetimeff.com. You can leave us voicemail questions like Christian did yesterday, or just scream at us in the comments when we give you wrong advice, which people seem to do in the comments right below the YouTube videos now too. So it's good to have some trolls. You're actually doing some things right. So Ryan, do you have any thoughts on any of that before we get into the news?
Nope, I love the comments. Good, bad, indifferent. Yeah, I'm all for it.
Yeah, no. So feel free to leave your questions for us too. Trade questions. We don't mind answering anything right on the side, and we'll get into you during this show.
News updates.
All right, so in the first little bit of news that we have tonight, DeAndre Swift has a minimal chance to play this week against the Vikings. So what are your thoughts on this, Ryan, and what is it going to do to that Lions backfield?
Yeah, so I'm thinking it looks very doubtful that he plays. Dan Campbell said he's very sore, said he probably won't know much until after practice Wednesday, but it's not looking good. As far as the backfield goes, I'm nervous to say this because every time I do, I'm usually wrong. But Jamal Williams should end up with a bulk of the work and should be a very solid play. If you are able to get him on waivers this week, we'll cover him on our waiver segment. Or if you happen to have him stashed on your bench for whatever reason right now.
Yeah, he is pretty interesting, especially going up against the Vikings. But when we get to the waiver part of the show, like we said, we will get into that a little bit more too. Also, Keelan Cole came down with COVID for the Jets. There seems to be COVID going around quite a bit this week. Just part of, I think it's going to be a seasonal thing going forward, which is kind of unfortunate, but we're seeing that around the league. So this is a wide receiving core you're going to obviously want to watch. You're going to watch everything going on in Dallas too, because it seems to be all over that team too. Just bits and pieces of it going everywhere. So just monitor that for the week. I don't really believe that's going to affect the Jets wide receiving core going forward this week for the reason that Cole was more of a 3 or 4th wide receiver, and they seem to be pretty deep at that position too. What's your thoughts on this? Do you believe it'll affect the Jets wide receiving core?
Not really. I think the biggest thing I'm watching right now is Corey Davis, if he's coming back this week. Because I think that's going to be the huge teller of what that offense is going to look like.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree with that too. If anything, it might just end up giving a little bit more work to Elijah Moore this week. So that's a good thing. Also, Taysom Hill is expected to get the start for the Saints, although the coaches seem to be trying to play that off like he's not going to be. I saw that in a report today. What's your thoughts on Taysom Hill this week playing potentially in a Thursday night game?
Listen, I love it. Okay,
I do too.
I don't know.
I'm playing him.
JJ you just need to play him just to spite JJ. He's definitely likely available in all of your leads. He hasn't looked great though when he has played. But he hasn't.
With that rushing upside, though, he
with,
still has that, I believe, top 10 to 15 range possibility. I mean, I understand the weapons aren't the best, but
yeah, and I was wrong actually. He hasn't played a full game for the Saints all season. So I'm very excited to see him play. I will definitely be tuning in and rooting for him.
Me too, because my playoff spot's on the line.
I think he is a solid play. I would argue that he's a better play than Cam Newton. He has the red zone upside just like Cam Newton does.
Mm-hmm.
But I would argue is a better passer.
Yeah, the reason why I'm playing him, guys, don't worry, it's not in a one quarterback format. It's actually a 2 QB dynasty league. So that's the reason why I'm playing him. And my quarterbacks right now is I've got Mac Jones, I've got Washington's quarterback, and I've got him. So I'm going with Washington's quarterback, and I'm going with him. So I'm going with the rushing ability of both of them.
Disrespectful, Joe. After match attack, just put up the week that he did.
Well,
I mean,
to be fair, he's playing the Bills, and he was going against the 30th ranked defense in the secondary. It's just not a good matchup for him. I might play him in the playoffs, but I'm going to go with the 2 rushing quarterbacks, and hopefully that second round pick that I traded to Ron actually pays off.
Yeah.
But to be fair, it was an exchange for a 3rd round pick. It was more of a flop of picks. I was just hoping to get more upside with it. So don't think that was too bad of a trade right off the bat, because Braun is going to try to brag about that if Taysom Hill plays like shit tomorrow. Speaking of shitty quarterbacks too, Daniel Jones strained his neck, and that is something we're going to want to monitor for the week, because I believe that could affect his throwing motion. Do you have any thoughts on this, Ryan? Or do you think this is just something that he's going to get a massage and play?
Honestly, I mean, it's definitely something to monitor, and especially after watching that offense last week. Well, this week still, I guess, kind of. I'm very hesitant on any of it unless you have Saquon. I think if Matt is banged up, it definitely sounds like there might be more rushing work. But yeah, I'm just not interested in Daniel Jones at all. He played solid that first 5 or 6 weeks, which according to Ron, everyone's going to remember forever. I've forgotten about it already because of how he's played since.
Yeah, no. Honestly, he's got a pretty good matchup. You could argue going up against the Dolphins, but the Dolphins have been sneaky, and I actually like them as a waiver pickup on defenses for the fact that Daniel Jones is just really bad at securing the ball. I've been looking up statistics for him, and they're trying to say this is a good matchup for him, but I don't think that's the case, and I think I'd rather play a defense. And I
agree. I'm in on the Dolphins defense right now. I played them. I started them last week. And I think they're pretty underrated, and they are a top 10 defense in fantasy so far this year. Yep. They're actually tied for 7th with the Broncos, but they're right behind the Buccaneers, and they're right behind the Colts. So pretty minimal difference. So they're a solid defensive pick. And I'd just like to point out, I think I talked about this a lot at the start of the season. The New England Patriots defense is number 1 in fantasy football right now.
Yep.
And I believe I mentioned that several times.
I was right there in the boat with you. I really thought all the veterans coming back was going to affect them because your defense wasn't bad, missing 6-7 starters last season. So I think that was just bound to happen too. Well, I think while we're talking about defenses, and we'll get into other ones, Miami, I think, is a good play this week, but they're on bye next week. I think there are some better options. And when we get into waivers that you could play for the next few weeks, that might entice you to pick a defense over the Miami Dolphins. So we'll get into that a little bit later too. And some other news too. The Vikings, in an update, told us that Delvin Cook should miss the next 2 weeks, and it seems to be pretty firm on that everywhere I'm looking. So I believe he's going to miss the next 2 weeks, which is fantastic considering he went off on a stretcher, and he's going to be right back in. But I believe this is going to increase the outlook of Justin Jefferson because there was a report coming out today that they're going to look to pass the ball a lot more. Not that backfield in current stable of running backs, which is only Alexander Mattison, doesn't get passing work. But if you're looking to pass the ball more, you're looking to get it into your best playmaker's hands. And I believe that's Justin Jefferson going forward. Do you have any thoughts on this, Ryan, or do you think it's actually going to go to other places on this offense?
No, I agree. I think as far as passing goes, they're pretty much going to rely on their same two guys. It's going to be Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson.
Mm-hmm.
I still think Madison's a solid play. He had 2 good weeks at the start of the season. So pretty much like when he gets over 20 carries, he has a solid day. 26 carries against Seattle, 25 against Detroit, had pretty good numbers. So really, you just want to see those number of attempts hit that like 20 range in order to get some value out of him.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree with that too. And we'll, like we mentioned, for the 4th or 5th time, we'll talk about Alexander Mattison when we get into the waiver portion of the show. In the last little bits of news clips that we have tonight too, Curtis Samuel was back finally, played in his first game this entire season. I believe it was his first game this entire season, was highly ineffective. But this is something to monitor. And also plays the waivers a little bit too, so we're kind of double dipping in categories here because J.D. McKissic went down with a serious injury last night. We still really don't have any updates on that. Have you heard anything, Ryan? Because I haven't.
I've not heard anything. I just know that it finally made Antonio Gibson fantasy relevant. Not finally. He's had relevant games, guys. Don't yell at me.
Don't pull a Ron Seymour on us.
Yeah, don't freak out. But it definitely made Gibson very fantasy viable. I do know, so it looks like right after the game, McKissic's agent came out and said that he's all good, he's fine. But that's also coming from his agent, so
right, and there's money attached to an agent, so good to know.
So do with that information what you would like. But I do like Antonio Gibson going forward. If he can get another 20-something carries, absolutely you got to start him.
And guys, before we get into the waivers section of the show too, we do have an apology that is owed on this show, and we heard it straight from the horse's mouth tonight. Apparently, JJ is going to record that apology that he lost a bet to with Ryan last week. And we're going to have it for the Thursday show for you. So that apology is coming, and we promise you'll get to hear it.
Rumor is that he attempted it today, but was trying too hard that he couldn't get through the whole letter. So he has to recompose himself and try again on Thursday.
Yep, he's going to try some deep breathing exercises. He's going to look at a poster of Matt Nagy, and then he'll be ready to go for Thursday. And we'll have that apology ready for you. The idol that is Matt Nagy. And with that, guys, enjoy our new drop for waivers. We've updated it recently. I like that one a lot better. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I'm with it.
Yeah, it's a little bit fancier than the other one. The other one seemed to cut off too quick. It was like a Google search bar. I'm like, yeah, it's a little ticky-tacky. Let's move on from that one. Not saying it was shit or anything, but just it was time to move on for that. So, Ryan, for waivers tonight, which position would you like to start with?
I've been on this since yesterday, so let's just get this one out of the way and hop into tight ends. I mean, I know we had at least one big injury. We have Darren Waller, who's up in the air whether he's going to be starting this upcoming week. Mm-hmm. And there's still some tight ends that are available in a lot of waivers in leagues that might be worth looking at if you're in a pickle there. And also Dan Arnold, I believe he's done for the season. I think
they put him on
fantasy season.
They put him on injury reserve. So in reality, I believe he is done for the season. He's got a chance to maybe come back for your championship if he came in the middle of that segment, 5 to 6 weeks. But by then, I think you're going to be looking to start someone else. You don't want to start him off an injury. So, yeah, I think realistically he's done for fantasy for the season. your only outlook is what you're going to do with him in Dynasty if you're running a Dynasty League team. So you're going to be looking at other options here. And there's a few on this list that could potentially do that. So you mentioned that Darren Waller is hurt, and there is a very interesting option out there for him. His name is Foster Moreau. And not only a lot of people know who Foster Moreau is. So the last time Darren Waller didn't play and Moreau played, he had 6 for 6. He was 6 for 6 on targets and caught everything. So everything that goes his way, he seems to catch. I believe he ran over 90% of routes too when he is actually in the game and Waller wasn't. I believe I heard that on the Fantasy Footballers podcast or something. So I believe he's a very interesting option for this weekend. I'm going to continue to look into him. Doesn't mean I'll get him off waivers now that we're mentioning him on this show, but what's your thoughts on Foster Moreau going forward, Ryan? See someone you can throw in the tight end spot?
I actually really like that you brought that up because, like, it's always so nice when if you're working with a team that you just pit the guy's back up and that's kind of viable. Like, you don't have to hop over and take someone else that might be kind of subpar. But he's had some decent games. I can't remember which games Waller was injured for, but I know week 7 put up 18 points. That was the 6 for 6 game you mentioned for 60 yards as well as a touchdown to go with it. Week 2 he had a decent game against Pittsburgh. So this guy has the ability to make plays, and I don't think many people are going to be looking at him in your league unless it's someone that has Darren Waller. But I don't think he's going to be super on the radar as much as some of these other tight end options. So he could be a sneaky one. I like it.
I agree with you there, and I'm actually looking to play him in DFS this weekend. He's kind of exciting me, and I'm looking at some film with him, and I've been watching him a little bit. He's not a favorite of mine. He's a pretty big unknown to me. But the more I watch his few plays, I really kind of want to play him in DFS. I'm kind of a fan, so I might find a way to sneak him into my roster this week. I don't know if he'll be as good as my Kendrick Bourne pick last week, which I felt pretty genius getting, but could be a fun player to throw into DFS lineups, and I think he's a viable starter this week. Could maybe get into that top 12 at tight ends, which has been absolutely horrendous this season.
Yeah.
And with that, you have more thoughts on Foster Moreau?
Nope. No more thoughts on him.
Okay, so let's move on to another tight end too. What do you think about CJ Uzomah this week? I understand he's been disappointing the last few outings, but he's going up against the Chargers defense, who is 4th worst against tight ends. And you kind of have to go with the adage typically that when a team is horrible against a tight end, typically they're going to give up yards. Do you think there's potential for him to get some catches this week and maybe get in the end zone?
It's just so hard for me to trust him just because he's so boomer bust. I think there's options. I think there's options I like more. And it's just so hard. I mean, you have T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Joe Mixon, all those guys in the offense. So it's so easy to kind of go under the radar. So I think there's options I like more, but I could totally see why someone would feel like taking the risk and playing him against the Chargers, and it could pay off big time.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you at that point too. And I think he is a decent option. If he wasn't, I don't believe I would put him on this list anyway. Another tight end I'd like to mention here too is Cole Kmet, and JJ is going to absolutely love this segment because he's really high on Cole Kmet too. Last game, he got 11 targets. He caught 8 of them and went for 65 yards. So he's obviously becoming more involved in this offense. What's your thoughts on Cole Kmet this week? He seems to be on the high priority of tight ends on the waiver wire, especially from what I looked at this week. So
Cole Kmet and Foster Moreau are pretty much like my 1 and 2 right at the top as far as waiver wire tight ends goes. Like you said, 11 targets last week, put up about 15 fantasy points. Had had a dud against the Baltimore in week 11, but had another strong showing against Pittsburgh before the bye week. I definitely think he's getting more involved in that offense. And we'll see. Do we know, is Allen Robinson coming back, or is he done still? Is he still out?
I don't think he's going to play. I don't have any updates on that. We're going to have to look into that for the Thursday show. But
I love if Allen Robinson's out, then I love the Cole Kmet pick.
Yeah, no. Who would you rather play this week, Cole Kmet or Foster Moreau?
That's the hard thing. I've been back and forth on that like all day. And I guess I'm gonna say Foster Moreau just because Arizona's a tough matchup. But on the flip side, if Allen Robinson's out, they pretty much have Darnell Mooney
And Cole
and Cole
Kmet.
Kmet, and then they're running backs. So I think he's a solid play.
I mean, they did have another receiver that got over 100 games, but come on. I mean, is Goodwin really going to get another 100-yard game this season? I don't see it. JJ might tell you otherwise. I don't know what his thoughts are on that. We can ask him next week when we see him, or we'll give him a call after the apology that he has coming to us and ask us his opinion on him. But anyway, yeah, I'm a lot more confident in these three guys specifically than this last one I'm going to mention, which is Jack Doyle, 81 yards and a touchdown. Do we have any interest in Jack Doyle? And is there any way he repeats what he did last week?
I think you at least have to give him a look, depending on how thin your waivers are at tight end. I know some leagues have different bench situations where you can have more players stashed, and I'm gonna assume a part of me would almost like let that one go and just hope that a lot of other people go for him just because of that big day that probably won't happen again.
Yeah,
I would kind of let someone else waste their waiver pickup on him.
Yeah, I agree with you there, but unfortunately, I think everyone kind of sees through the fog here. I don't think they're going to.
Right.
I don't think he's going to repeat this. I think it was just kind of an oddity. The Bucks secondary is pretty god awful. It's really bad, and they've been looking to fix that all off season. I mean, Carson Wentz tore them up, and Carson Wentz has had his good weeks, but not great weeks this year. So that's telling. And Jack Doyle was one of his top options on the week. I'm just not looking for that to continue.
Yeah, and I think the Colts may have realized with losing, even though they had Wentz slinging it, they need to pound the rock with Jonathan Taylor. They have to control the clock. And they have to. So they might lean back towards that a little bit more. In my in
your expert opinion,
it'd be worth watching. In my
your expert opinion.
I'm a licensed professional. I'm just not licensed.
Yes, exactly. All right, Ryan. Is there any other tight ends you'd like to bring up, or would you like to move to another position?
I have two more. Just with it,
go ahead.
The caveat is I don't love either of these. But if you're in a pinch and you need somebody, I figure I have to at least mention them. Ron's favorite team, Evan Ingram with the Giants. New offensive coordinator over there. We didn't really see a ton of production out of him for that. But he has been, he's been steady. You know,
until you start him, and then he won't be.
Right. I mean, even last week, he only got 3 receptions, but he was targeted 6 times.
Starting Evan Ingram makes me want to throw up in my mouth.
I know. I said I don't love it, but targeted 6 times versus Philly, targeted another 5 versus Tampa. I don't think he's someone that's going to win you a fantasy week, but he probably won't lose it for you either.
Not against that sneaky Miami defense. I think you're 100% on the ball with that, and I think he's more likely to throw a dud and a big goose egg, 0 points for you in total this week, as opposed to actually playing well this week. I really am looking to avoid him at all costs. Who was your other tight end?
My other one is, you might like this one. I'm going real deep here. All right. Mm-hmm. We have a tight end by the name of Ryan Griffin from the New York Jets.
Shit, real deep.
You know, he's been coming on a little bit. Had 3 receptions with 20 yards this past week. Was targeted 4 times against Miami, twice against Buffalo, but that's tough defense. But targeted another 7 versus Indy. So the quarterbacks, whatever quarterback's playing on that carousel of quarterbacks you have over there, they are looking at him. So he might be good for a solid, somewhere between the 5 and 10 point range. Like I said, might be another guy that won't win you the week, but won't lose it for you either. And they're going up against Philly this week, which could be a positive matchup.
Yeah, and I mean, if COVID wipes out that whole wide receiving core, it'll be a fantastic matchup for you.
Right.
So just something else to keep an eye on. I'm not wishing COVID on
It,
anyone, and especially not my own team, but just something to observe.
and I think so. If I had to rank them, let's do a quick ranking. I think I would go. I think you convinced me a little bit. I think I'd go Foster Moreau, Cole Kmet, and then
Take your time with this. I know this one's a real brain teaser.
I don't know. Yeah, and then I guess like
CJ Uzama, I think, would be next on mine.
That's what I'm thinking. Uzama, and then honestly, I'd probably go Ryan Griffin, and then Evan Ingram.
And we didn't even mention Jack Doyle. And Evan Ingram, yep, you can throw him straight in the trash. So I agree with you on that point. All right. So
another guy I did not mention.
There's a lot of tight ends on this show.
This one doesn't really count because he's very taken in a lot of leagues, but he's available in about 40 to 50% depending. Logan Thomas made his comeback this week. Nothing spectacular. 3 receptions on 31 yards, but he was targeted 6 times. So that's just something to keep in mind going forward. Like I said, he might not be available in your league, but
insanely playable though, I think, considering the wasteland that is the tight end position the last 2 years. All right, Ryan, running backs or quarterbacks next?
Ooh, let's go with running backs. They're so much fun.
There is so many of them too. So let's get the big elephant out of the room here. Alexander Mattison, who is going to be starting for Dalvin Cook against the Detroit Lions this week. In games where Dalvin Cook hasn't played this year, he's averaged over 23 fantasy points a game in regular format. So what's the outlook on Alexander Mattison this week? And is he by far the number 1 running back on waivers, if he's even available?
Yeah, I think it's a no-brainer. But I also think that in a lot of leagues, it was such an obvious handcuff, especially after the first, even before the first Dalvin Cook injury, a lot of people picked him up.
That's right. I handcuffed him.
I know he was actually drafted in all my leagues. But if he's on your waivers, I think it's basically a no-brainer.
Yeah, he's a smash start this week. I believe he's in the top 10 no matter what goes on. I mean, he's going up against Detroit. They're looking to get passing work done, and that is right up his alley. He will definitely get passing work, and he is going to be the bell cow until Dalvin Cook gets back. And honestly,
do we know when did Dalvin leave the game? Like what?
It was later in the game, late third, early fourth quarter, I believe.
And Madison still put up 10 points for that week for that game, so that just gives you an idea.
Yeah, what you're in for. And honestly, I think I wouldn't mind just riding him the whole rest of the season as opposed to bringing in an injured Dalvin Cook. Not that I wouldn't play an injured Dalvin Cook because you have to, because he's immensely talented. But I would just feel more comfortable him not getting banged up the last 4 weeks. That's how comfortable I am throwing in Alexander Mattison. I think he's going to be in for a fantastic week.
And I think that notion just shows, too, probably how I feel like the Vikings probably don't feel in a huge rush to get Dalvin Cook back when you have someone like Alexander Mattison behind him. It's not like the CMC Chuba Hubbard situation where the starter is so much better. Not that I'm saying Madison's as good as Cook, but the gap is definitely smaller between those two than between Hubbard and CMC.
Yeah, I completely agree with that notion. And with that, excellent movement, Ryan. Let's move into Chuba Hubbard.
Yeah.
So he averaged over 20 carries while Christian McCaffrey was gone. Is he a solid starter, or is there some threats in that backfield to him?
I don't know. I mean, in games where he got over 20 carries, I mean, he put up solid RB2 numbers. I think if you had Christian McCaffrey, you're probably hurting, but then honestly, you might be out of the playoffs if you had him, depending on, because when your first round pick doesn't play for half the season, it's not a good go.
Yeah, but I never seem to own Christian McCaffrey, so I'm playing the littlest fucking fiddle for this in the world. Don't care for this that much at all. I've never got the first pick. I'd never spend that much on him in auction league. Never have him, so I wish him all well, and I hope he gets healthy quick. But for fantasy purposes, there's no sweat off my back for this one.
I think you'd put him in as RB2, but even as far as flex goes, if I have a stronger wide receiver, I'd probably look at that. For whatever reason, I just love wide receivers, so I always have like a stash of them on my bench that can put up solid numbers, even though I can only play like 3 of them a week, but whatever.
Yeah, you and me tend to play different styles. Mine seems to be scattered with running backs.
And I've tried to be mindful of that, and then I still end up with all these wide receivers. Like I don't.
You're like, well, he can have a good week. Why don't I throw him
Yeah.
on my bench too? I do disagree with you in the notion that I would throw I don't know what you would consider a talented wide receiver over Chuba Hubbard, though. I mean, he's still a starting running back, and I understand it's on the Panthers who currently are running Cam Newton out there and who could take away some of these red zone touchdowns for Chuba Hubbard. But listen, he's a starting running back in this league, and I think he could still put up running back 2 numbers, lower end running back 2 numbers, but I think he's a good pick, and he's obviously a pretty decent waiver pickup if he's there, if he's even there.
Yeah, definitely decent waiver. To give you an example, like in one of my leagues, I have, like in my flats, I have Jalen Waddle, or like a T Higgins. Some of those guys.
Week this week.
Yeah, so I would it'd definitely be a consideration who to start. It is worth noting that they're on bye for week 13. So this would be a pickup that you'd be looking at for week 14. He's available in about 60% of leagues. Mm-hmm. He does kind of have a tough upcoming schedule, though. So listen to this. So week 14 against Atlanta, that's not awful.
That's a good matchup.
But then plays Buffalo week 15.
That's a brutal matchup.
Tampa Bay week 16.
Not good.
Then you got New Orleans week 17, which isn't terrible.
New Orleans, I think, is okay because there's passing work there. But chances are, if you're playing him and get those 3 spots and he is like your running back 1, you're probably not making it that late into the playoffs anyway. So hopefully it's your running back 3.
And then week 18, you have Tampa Bay again. So I think his value for the rest of the season is severely diminished just by how tough of a schedule against defenses he has coming up. I mean, three of those games are against top running defenses.
Okay, so who would you rather have for the upcoming weeks then? Would you want maybe 1 good week from him, or maybe say 2 good weeks from Sony Michel, who may be filling in for Henderson for a little bit, depending on what happens with his injury?
Ooh.
Who's also the next player on the waiver list.
And, Sony Michel, I gotta keep my homerism in chat. Sony Michel, former Patriot. He has the ability to be a bell cow and get a lot of carries and do that. He's only broken 20 attempts once this season, and that was against Tampa, and put up 11 points. I think if I was, I don't know. I think my stance is going to be if your RB2 spot is blank and you have to choose between Hubbard or Sony Michel.
So the higher waiver priority. So this is important.
You're just going to have a bad time. Like you should go for Jamal Williams.
I agree with that too. I honestly believe that if you need a running back to actually get you into the playoffs, I think Jamal Williams would be the option over those 2. So excellent that you actually mentioned that. Obviously, like we said, Alexander Mattison is the number 1 waiver priority, but he's probably not available in your league anyway. So Chuba Hubbard, Sony Michel, and Jamal Williams. Where are you ranking the other 3 then? In what order? I'm not letting you get away from this question.
I know you're making me answer. You're gonna put me in a bad spot. So a quad injury. We don't really know how long he'll be out for,
or if he's even going to be out.
Yeah, so I guess I'd go Hubbard just based on the fact that Henderson might only miss a week,
and the fact he's going to get season-long work.
Yeah, so I guess I'd take Hubbard because you'll have him for more games. So it'd be McKissick, Jamal Williams,
not McKissick,
Hubbard,
not McKissick.
Madison starts with an M. Madison, Jamal Williams, Chuba Hubbard, Sony Michel.
Yeah, and that's interesting. So let's talk about Michel a little bit more because we kind of glossed over that too. As you mentioned, I think he's a pretty good fit in this offense too. And this is an offense that has had some down weeks, not scoring, but just in the losing category. So I think they may want to have a little bit more balance of an offense going forward. And should he miss, I think Sony Michel could be in for at least a good week and might help you get into the playoffs. And for all we know, your playoffs could be starting next week or the week before. So if you need that spot, Sony Michel might be actually a better option than Chuba Hubbard if you're trying to get that win. But if you're, trying to supplant your roster and you're at the back end of the playoffs, maybe if it's a 6-team playoff and you're the 6th team, you'd probably be better off going for Chuba Hubbard. So there is strategy to play in this.
Yeah, it's worth noting that Sony Michel, the Rams are going up against Jacksonville, which is a pretty favorable matchup.
Mm-hmm.
So he could be someone where they get the lead early and then they just start handing the ball off. And if Henderson's not there, we might see him just, get that 20 carries or more and have a decent fantasy outing. So for week 13, I guess I would take Sony Michel since Hubbard's on bye. But then Michel might. I'm bouncing back and forth, aren't I? I can't commit.
You are. You really can't commit to this.
I'm still going to go Hubbard for the season, the rest of the season value. But I think next week Michel has the better matchup.
But the true answer is secret option C, Jamal Williams, is what you said.
Yes.
So what's this week going to look like for Jamal Williams against the Vikings?
I think he's going to have a good he's one of those other guys where it's one of the rare things where the starter gets injured, but you have someone that can come in and kind of pick up right where they left off.
Workload? Yep.
Yeah, I mean, Williams, if Williams gets the same amount of workload that Swift gets, then I think you're good. Put up 13 points against Chicago after Swift left early with the injury.
Mm-hmm.
And every time, if he gets into double-digit attempts, he's a solid play. So I really like Jamal Williams coming up, even though it's up against the Vikings.
I could easily see him having a 100-yard all-purpose game and a touchdown or two. I could easily see him having that kind of game, and that being the only offense the Lions produce.
I mean, he wasn't far off this past week, and that wasn't even playing the whole game. 65 yards rushing, another 20 receiving. So he could easily do 100 yards when he's playing the whole game.
Yeah, I agree with that too. So let's talk about two running backs that are on bye. Dontrell Hilliard, he's on bye, had 131 yards and a touchdown against your Pats. Deontay Foreman, over 100 yards in that game. Who's the starter for the Texans? And is this a situation where you aren't picking up one of these two unless you're actually securely in the playoffs and going for these other options?
Yeah, it's hard because I believe Hilliard got out-carried. So Hilliard went for 12. I think Foreman went for 19.
Yep.
Hilliard did have that breakout run that was like 60-something yards, I think, which really jacked up his stats.
Yep.
And I know you and I disagree on this one, but I think I would lean towards Foreman.
I lean towards Hilliard because of the passing work.
So, but they didn't use him that much. I mean, I know against the Pats, they couldn't get anything going really as far as passing period.
Right, but the game previous to that, Hilliard got the passing work.
Right. I think the biggest determination is going to be
how shitty
the red zone. Yeah, in the red zone. Who gets the red zone stuff? And also, Foreman had that fumble, that big fumble that one could argue kind of greatly impacted the outcome of the Patriots-Tennessee game.
That did. Or you could just do what I did in Dynasty and pick up both of them because I have an extended roster.
You can't be wrong if you have both, right?
Well, not if you start one and bench the other.
Because if he plays for the Patriots, you wouldn't see him again until like next year.
It took half a year for Stevenson to get back on the field.
Right, we saw him in the first game, and then he was out for So yeah, that's a tough one, man. That's a tough two to choose between.
Okay. Now with that discussion, let's start getting into the real disgusting, because you have to get into the disgusting of waivers, because somebody's going to get the disgusting. At the back end of the running back waivers, who are you more interested in? Boston Scott playing the Jets or Tevin Coleman playing the Eagles? And do you want either one of these two?
So I actually understand the value, why people are looking at Boston Scott. It sounds like Miles Sanders re-aggravated that ankle.
I have a comment on that before you move forward. Yesterday,
Okay.
I said I wouldn't trade. It was Gaskins and was it Devontae Parker? No, Amari Cooper.
Yeah, I don't remember.
It was Amari Cooper for Hollywood Brown. After seeing this injury, I would reverse my decision, actually make that trade. So if that trade is still available, make that trade now. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, so Boston Scott had 15 rush attempts this past week. Now he's going up against the Jets.
Jordan Howard's expected to be out, as you said.
Yeah, so I'm taking Boston Scott for sure if I have to pick between those two.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there too, for the simple reason that Tevin Coleman did get the majority of the work with the Jets, but Ty Johnson's still there. He's, I think, more talented, and this random ass guy named Austin Walters came out of nowhere and got carries too, so that's more of a true committee. I could see Boston Scott being in for a good game.
And the fact that the Jets don't make any sense. Like, they could completely change who they give the ball to next week.
Right. Austin Walters is going to get 25 carries next week.
And for whatever reason, the Eagles just love Boston Scott and hate Miles Sanders, so he gets the work.
That's right. All right, Ryan. Any interest in Tony Jones this week if the Saints players don't go?
No. Kamara's sounding like he's going to be back, right?
He got a limited rep in this week, so I mean, he wouldn't be practicing if he wasn't going to play, I don't believe. We'll see.
I don't love it.
Yeah, I don't either. I think I would rather have everyone on this list except Tevin Coleman. I think before them, I think I'd rather have Tony Jones in between those. So, yeah, the rest of these running backs over Tony Jones.
Well, while we're down with the disgustingness, I do have one other running back in a certain backfield that I know you hate.
Go ahead.
Matt Breida with the Buffalo Bills. He was outsnapped. He was outsnapped by Devin Singletary, but he still got 11 touches, 55 yards, and got his third touchdown in 3 games. So he's on a streak. I think you could definitely argue he's jumped in front of Zach Moss on the depth chart. And I know this backfield sucks for running backs. Are you looking at him at all?
There's a reason I call this a shitty committee, and no, I have no interest in him. On to the next topic. All right, so let's talk about the quarterbacks now. So let's talk about JJ LaPlante's favorite player, also probably listed in apologies somewhere, Taysom Hill. Is he going to get into that top 10 to 15 quarterback range, and is he the number 1 quarterback on the week, or is it someone like Tua Tagovailoa, which also makes me puke in my mouth?
I want Tua over Taysom Hill. So over the last 2 weeks, I read a thing that Tua's completed like 85% of all his pass attempts.
He's played great,
which is insane, and he's developed a great rapport with Jalen Waddle, which I'm loving since our trade. He's only gone over 300 yards once this season, but if you're just looking to plug a hole that you have at the quarterback position right now, I think Tua is a great pick.
Yo to you too, Sua.
Oh,
how you doing tonight? Welcome into the heckling fandom. As always, you are a regular. Yeah, no, I don't want to admit you're right. I think you're right though. Taysom Hill is probably the second option for quarterback, just simply on the rushing ability. I really believe he can finish that 10 to 15 range, but so can Tua, and Tua's just been playing out of his damn mind the last few weeks. So With puke in my mouth, Tua is probably the better waiver pickup this week. Sua's got a comment for us late in the show, so let's see what he has to say. I play Josh and Thielen and Henderson. Well, Henderson might not play this week, so unless he ends up getting Sony Michel, that could be good for you. Potentially, you could target Sony Michel if you think your opponent's going to target Sony Michel. Thielen hopefully won't have 2 touchdowns again. And which Josh do you think he's referring to here, Ryan?
Allen, maybe?
Yeah, he was coming off a 4-touchdown game. So hopefully Thielen just goes into the retirement home this week, and Henderson might not play. So it might not be horrible for you.
It's worth noting Josh Allen has to go up against a very tough Patriots defense that will likely take Stephon Diggs away from him. So you might not see him perform as well as what we've seen.
He does play the Pats, and Allen, I think he's going to be in for a good game. I think Ryan's team will give them a run for their money, but what they're going to do is shut down the number one option, whether that is Knox or Stephon Diggs. That is hard to say because that tight end has been playing out of his mind. I'm assuming it's going to be Stephon Diggs that you guys will stop.
I think we'll see a big game from Dawson Knox. I do.
You think they'll stop Stephon Diggs in typical Bill Belichick fashion?
Yep.
But that'll be a fun Monday night game. We have to get together and watch that one.
Yeah, I'm in.
All right, so like we said, with puke in my mouth, Tua Tagovailoa is probably the number one quarterback pickup of the week, but I am very happy to play Taysom Hill this week, who I think can also finish in that top 10 to 15 range. Now, let me ask you an even more pukeable question. Is Matt Ryan a decent play against a really bad Tampa Bay secondary?
Oof.
Do you even want to consider it?
They've just been so bad. I think there's others, though, that I would
play over Matt Ryan.
I find it hard to believe that Matt Ryan's your only option in your league. Like, Taysom Hill should be there. Tua, Jimmy G that we've talked about for 2 weeks now.
Would you play Cam Newton over him?
Okay, no. I would not play. Wait, who's Newton playing? That might matter.
Oh, that is brutal.
That is brutal.
Go on with your comment, then we'll mention what Sue mentioned here.
So no, I don't want Matt Ryan. That Falcons offense just
makes you want to cry.
Yeah.
Sue says I need Najee to have a week like he did last week. Yeah, well, Najee had a week like he did last week, and I still lost. So it doesn't all roll on Najee and the running backs, unfortunately. I hope you're not in the same boat I was last week, Sue. So hopefully you get the win.
Well, they go up against Baltimore, which is tough.
Yeah, that's a tough matchup, and they're going to look to shut them down. They're going to look for those wide receivers to get their work again because that formula has been helping other teams beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. So look for that formula to continue. You said there's better options for quarterbacks out there, Ryan. Who else? Taylor Henneke?
Well,
Henneke might be out there. Jimmy G?
Definitely Jimmy G. Definitely Tua. I would lean towards Taysom Hill. Yeah, and I would probably take Henneke over Matt Ryan too. I'm just sipping the haterade on the Falcons right now.
No, I think you're very happily sipping the haterade there. So if we're going to mention Atlanta and get on that topic, let's move right into the wide receivers unless you have another comment here about it.
Nope.
Russell Gage, is there any chance you're playing Russell Gage? I mean, he had 60 yards. Is there any chance that you want Russell Gage for your bench at least?
No. Like, just because, and this is just me, like, I'll have a guy like that on my bench, and he'll go ahead and put up 18 points or whatever. Mm-hmm. So then I'll start him the next week over someone that's more consistent but lower points, and then he'll put up, like, 2. So, no, I don't want Russell Gage anywhere.
There's not a lot of good receivers this week. Sue says I play McCaffrey and Jay Taylor, but McCaffrey is out and Jay Taylor is on bye week. Jonathan Taylor
Yeah.
being on bye week is very, very helpful, and McCaffrey not playing is immensely helpful too. So you might, sir, be in for a very good week. Good luck this week.
Which is brutal in some fantasy leagues. Like my one league, the playoffs start this upcoming week. So there's guys who like
Around
have
bye.
guys like Jonathan Taylor. Yeah, Jonathan Taylor that's on bye week. Like for the
Bet you
first round of
that
playoffs.
comes up in the fantasy league meeting that they want to move the playoffs off a week next year.
yeah, because is week 14. Week 14 is the last week for buys, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So I think that was something unforeseen. I think with the new schedule and everything, it might have screwed everybody up a little bit. So you'll definitely see that be revisited.
Well,
in a
if
lot
you
of
were
leagues.
smart enough to pay attention to that, and kudos to you. That's all I've got to say with that, because I didn't pay attention to that kind of shit. But luckily, I'm not going to have to deal with that, because our playoffs luckily start in week 15. So I'm pretty happy about that. Let's talk about some more wide receivers here. I understand Curtis Samuel only had one catch, but is there a reason to take a speculative ad on him now that McKissick is potentially missing time and that Washington offense is going to need to pass the ball to someone? And if healthy, he does have some explosion. So does he excite you at all for potentially maybe scoring well in a few games later in this season? Not that there's much left.
I don't think so, because I think that when McKissick went out with an injury, they just used Antonio Gibson more, and it worked out fine. Like, so just put Gibson in and do the same thing.
Fair enough. Okay. Now let's talk about someone that you're a little bit more related to, and I felt like a genius putting him in my DFS lineup last week. Kendrick Bourne, and he's actually down on the waivers a little bit this week, which kind of surprised me because he's had two big games in the last 3 weeks. 2 touchdowns again this week. I understand it was against the Titans secondary, but I feel like he's getting more looks in this offense. Is that the case, Ryan? And do you have any interest in Kendrick Bourne?
Yeah, so I definitely think he's worth a look. I think he's been getting more work than, I would argue he's been getting more work than Jacoby Myers lately. So Kendrick Bourne, he's gone over 20 points 3 times this season.
Mm-hmm.
He's another guy that he's not going to lose you the week. Like, he probably won't put up a dud on you, but he also has that boom potential to like win you the week if at plugging him in at wide receiver 3 or a flats. 6 targets last week. Had another, and then was on 3 straight games of 4 targets. I mean, he's getting a solid anywhere from 4 to 7 targets a game.
Shit, the Bourne supremacy is starting again.
Yeah, and his catching percentages are really good. Like he caught 5 of his 6 targets. Then 4 of 4 for the 2 weeks previous, 3 of 4, 4 of 7, 4 of 4. So he really catches what's thrown at him, which is very dependable. So you know if he's getting targeted, he's going to probably get at least 80% of those.
Yeah, and I agree with everything you got to say there. I really like Kendrick Bourne, and I think he should be a higher waiver priority, especially if you need a wide receiver. You interested in Van Jefferson if he's out there? Do you think he's going to be a big part of that Rams offense going forward? He's more picked up in leagues, but I believe he's still available in some. So what's your thoughts on Van Jefferson going forward?
No, I like Van Jefferson. I don't have his exact like snap count, but he's on the field pretty much the whole game.
It's around 90%, I believe. I believe it's above 90%.
Yeah, so he's out there. And even this past week where he had a very solid week, that was only catching 9 targets, and he only caught 3 of them and did that. He hasn't gone under 5 points since week 6. He's been right up around 10, a little bit over. Going up against a Jacksonville defense. Yeah, I really like Van Jefferson.
All right. And then finally, my last one, you may have some, but we'll get to that. Any interest in Nick Westbrook-Ikhine in a destroyed Titans wide receiving core? I understand he played the Patriots this week, which was difficult for him, considering that secondary is very good. So do you have any interest in this player?
I say yes, just because even with how terrible their passing game was,
which was bad.
he still put up 11 points. He got 25 yards off of 2 targets and a touchdown. They, as you pointed out, they have nobody currently. As it stands right now, they still don't have Julio or AJ Brown, correct?
Yep.
No Derrick Henry. 2 pretty okay running backs. I mean, I shouldn't say that. They each put up over 100 yards, but they got to pass at some point. And week 14 goes up against Jacksonville. Week 15, Pittsburgh. Yeah, I like him as the look, and he might even be someone that you don't have to use your first waiver pickup on. Put him down as your number 2 or number 3.
And may I say, he probably comes cheaply in DFS. So someone that you may be able to throw into your lineup if you go expensive at other positions. So keep a look at that.
He is going into bye week 13, but for week 14, definitely worth a look.
But this is the time of year where you're adding guys a few weeks ahead of time, too. So just consider that because your playoffs are right around the corner. It's okay to have 2 defenses on your bench, especially if you don't have one that's solid all around. And it's okay to have that backup quarterback that has a good matchup. So consider doing
if you're in a position where your whole team's healthy, everything's going great, then awesome. Handcuffs. But you could take these guys so other people can't have them. Like if you got someone on your bench that's just hasn't been doing anything, drop them and pick up some of these other guys so that it prevents opponents from being able to have them if you have to play them in the playoffs.
That's right. Sua, like we mentioned to you, you're going up against Henderson this week. It might be proactive for you to actually pick up Sony Michel because then it keeps them away from your opponent. That's dirty shit you can play. And in our league, we've been seeing certain players, including myself once or twice, picking up players and then dropping them after Thursday so people can't use them on Sunday. So it's all fair in games. If you've got the spot, you use the spot. Always
chess, not checkers.
Forward. That's right. Keep playing chess, guys. And speaking of chess, let's talk about the defenses unless you have a receiver you'd like to mention.
No, you covered pretty much everyone I had on my list. There was only one other one I was eyeing, and I know I talked about him several weeks ago, and you were just like, no, absolutely not. That's stupid. But I'm going to bring him up again just because I refuse to let it go, even though I'm probably wrong. T.Y. Hilton.
No.
You're still a firm no?
That's a firm no because, listen, Jack Doyle outpaced him. I have no interest in T.Y. Hilton.
All right. Did get 5 targets. Out of those, he got 4 receptions, one of them being a touchdown.
Don't care.
Goes up against a shoddy Houston Texans defense this upcoming week.
Now, see, that's different. I didn't even think of that. And thanks for mentioning that. Now I'll take a look at him. He is very good against Houston, and that's the only team he's good against. Listen, he puts up insane numbers against Houston every single time he plays them. So thanks for mentioning that because I didn't even see that this week. So absolutely, I love him this week. No other. I don't know why, but he's excellent against them. So you are a genius for that for this week. But any other week, no, I do not want T.Y. Hilton.
It is worth noting 4 targets for 4 receptions on 80 yards when he played the Texans back in week 6.
Yeah, he's just warming up for the Texans. That's all.
Yes, the only time he's broken more than 28 yards this season.
Yeah, there's a reason why on the Fantasy Footballers podcast, his name is T.Y. Houston.
Yes, so I'm going to accept that as Joe saying I'm half right. So I'll count it as a 50-50 victory. And now I shouldn't have mentioned that, though, because he was going to be one of my plays in DraftKings, and now I just gave my game plan away.
Yeah.
The things I do for listeners.
Yeah, the things you do for listeners, and now he's probably in my lineup because he just statistically always plays well against Houston. I don't know why. I don't know if he wants to buy a vacation home there after he retires. He just plays well there.
Just one more, and I know we mentioned him briefly. I'm like super hesitant on it, but after the week he had where Sleeper was only projecting him for 2 points, Deshaun Jackson.
No.
Went off, like we said, huge big play kind of guy. No. He does have a pretty, I think he has a pretty friendly schedule coming up, if they would let me see it.
He does this once a year. This was his one game.
Yeah, you're right. He does do it once a year.
Who's his opponent next week?
So he's got Washington, Kansas City, Cleveland, Denver, and Chargers. So
I mean, I think you could shoot and pray for him in Kansas City, but even they've had an improved defense and they've been playing pretty well. I actually have them in a potential pickup list this week.
I would kind of sort of maybe. If I have room on my bench, I would consider just stashing him just to see if he like breaks out. I don't think it happens, but it might just be for SNGs just to kind of wait and see.
Yeah, well, with COVID and all the injuries, it's likely that a lot of people do not have that many bench spots where you can pick them up. You may be able to pick up a Sony Michel, but it's unlikely you can pick up a Deshaun Jackson. So just consider that before you actually do it. Yeah, I'm happy for you.
I have him on my bench. I'm just trying to justify my own decision.
Yeah, well, I have too many injuries to even do that. So let's move on to the defenses. As we mentioned, defense is exciting. The weekly pickups. Again, Miami has been fantastic the last few weeks, and they made Cam Newton look like he needed to go back to college. And they're going up against Daniel Jones, who plays like he's got Crisco on his hands every single week. He's careless with the ball, apt to fumble. Ron will tell you he hasn't fumbled a lot this season, but guess what? A defense that could make you fumble is the Dolphins, and I really like them this week against the Giants. What's your thoughts on Miami?
Yeah, I love Miami's defense. I played them in a couple leagues this past week. Like you mentioned, they have the Giants, and also like it's the only downside with them is I do believe. One second, gotta make sure I'm right before I say something stupid.
They get blasted in the comments.
They do have a bye week 14, so you'll be picking them up, and then you're gonna have to do another defense right around. But after that, they have the Jets week 15.
Yep.
Jets week 15, New Orleans week 16, Tennessee week 17, and then New England week 18. So you might have like 3 weeks of solid defensive matchups.
And most leagues aren't playing in week 18 unless your league is absolute savage and you're playing backup QBs at that point with teams that potentially have the bye. So, which will only be 2 teams this year because there's only bye weeks for an AFC and an NFC team. But anyway, we digress. And this is an interesting strategy and point that you brought up that I wanted to mention. Miami has the bye after this week. But if you need to get into the playoffs, there is an option that has 2 decent matchups the next 2 weeks. And I want you to consider them before we talk about this third defense, which has a fantastic matchup. And it's Kansas City. Kansas City is going up against Denver, who I think is pretty average on defense. And Kansas City has been shutting down some pretty good offenses, one of them including the Cowboys. And their opponent after that, the Raiders. It's Raiders it's Raiders after that. So listen, I believe they have some pretty good matchups here. Denver, pretty plain vanilla offense. I think they could play pretty well against them. And the Raiders are a little shaky on offense. I understand they have a good game coming up against the Cowboys, but the Cowboys tend to give up a lot of points and yards to every offense. So I think that's 2 pretty good matchups for Kansas City. And if they get ahead, they could potentially get their pass rushers against these 2 teams. And I think you could play them the next 2 weeks, especially if you're looking for that playoff spot. And if you need to get into the playoffs, you may want to try to get this defense. Whereas opposed to if you're already secured for a spot, you may want Miami's defense, who has a great matchup and potentially the first week of the playoffs for you against the Jets. It's a great matchup. So again, you have to consider where you are in your league at this point, because those little details are what could help you actually bring home the hardware. And that brings up my last point in the final defense I wanted to mention, which is if you're secured for playoffs, even if you're not, the one that can help you get in this week is the Vikings against Detroit. Listen, Detroit is god-awful on offense. And the Vikings, well, maybe not the best defense in the league this year. They're playing Detroit, and Detroit is shit. The Vikings are a great matchup this week. So best ones for the week, I believe, are Miami and Vikings. But if you need one to help you get into the playoffs for 2 weeks because Miami is on bye, I think Kansas City is the one for you to go. You have any thoughts on this, Ryan? I mean, you could
No,
always
like
play
you
the
said,
game. You could always play the game of dropping one and picking up another the other week, but it's a risk. It's still something to consider.
I love Miami's defense, especially coming up. Another team I was just looking at real briefly that has, like you were talking about if you've secured playoffs, so you kind of got to be thinking towards the end of the season when you'd be in the playoffs. Tampa has a very decent end of the year schedule. So they play the Falcons week 13, which isn't bad. You could start them against the Falcons. The Bills week 14, which is tough. But then their next 4 games after that are the Saints, the Panthers, the Jets, and the Panthers.
That is some good matchups.
Yeah. And also, another point, we mentioned the New England Patriots defense briefly. They do have a bye week coming up week 14. I would almost argue that when you have a number one defense like that, you don't drop them to add another one. I think in that situation, I would be willing to give up a bench spot to hold on to the Patriots defense for the week.
Oh, absolutely. There's no reason I would drop them. They've been fantastic this year.
So my other question was, and I know you had mentioned Miami. Is that a similar situation you would consider with Miami?
Yes, because they got good matchups going up. You could have the Jets week 1 of your playoffs, which is absolutely fantastic if Zach Wilson's out there. It's a rookie, and he's bound to make mistakes against a Dolphins defense, which is coming on now. So, yes, I absolutely would do that. Something to definitely consider, and something, like we said, that could help you bring home the hardware. And with that, Ryan, I think we're through the waiver show. Do you have anything you'd like to say to the heckling fandom before we get out of here?
No, not really, except I do have one other podcast, our sister podcast, Garbage Time MMA. We have some fights coming up this weekend, headlined by Font versus Aldo. Me and Casey will be getting that show done, hopefully Thursday or Friday. Get the pits out for you, some DFS stuff, all that. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at Garbage Time MMA, as well as on the Garbage Time FF website, garbagetimeff.com. So look for us there.
Yeah, guys, and obviously you could find this show on www.garbagetimeff.com. But also, Garbage Time Fantasy Football has an Instagram as well. You can send us messages there if you're shy or if you just want to talk to us. We'll answer questions there too. Feel free to put any ideas you have out there. We'd love to hear from you. We also put sample clips out there too if you can't reach the show. So good points of the show that you need to hear out. Feel free to listen to those sample clips too. And again, you can find us anywhere that you listen to podcasts. It looks like Ryan's got something for us. What is it, Ryan?
I did get one quick note during the pod that they're actually saying Jones might miss the matchup against the Dolphins, which if he's out, then I'm taking the Dolphins everywhere.
That's 100%. Yeah, guys, so you can find this show on Apple, Google, Iheartradio, Tunein, Spotify, here on YouTube, anywhere you listen to podcasts. Please like and subscribe to us. Help us out with the algorithm. We'd love to get this show everywhere, and we'd love to make this show your guys' show because you comment in the questions, and we will answer them for you. You will hear from one of us if you leave a comment or a question. Anytime, anywhere, guys, okay? Join the heckling fandom. Have a good night. See you Thursday.